Now, earlier on today at the event, we were talking about educational character and mission. So I've come to Birmingham. It's always good to be back in the West Midlands. And the person I'm with, who I'll introduce in a moment, is a partner, so a big name educational lawyer, and a lawyer that focuses on students and universities and the relationship between students and universities. She's also big in social media. She is a BNOT, big name on Twitter. So if you want to follow some people on Twitter that are sort of chatting about higher education issues and Joe Johnson and the HE bill and those sorts of things, my guest is someone to follow, and we'll put her Twitter handle up later. She's also a regular writer for Wonky, the HE blog. I'm also a regular writer for Wonky, the HE blog. Very much recommend it. You met Mark earlier. So let's introduce then Smita Jamdar, who's a partner at Shakespeare Martineau, who I've got some questions for around universities and Brexit and educational character and mission and stuff. So Smita, really good to see you. Brexit.
Okay, so when we think about the Brexit vote, I think what it did was reveal some very, very long-standing and deep divisions in our society. And a number of those divisions were very, very pertinent to higher education. So the single biggest determinant of whether or not you would vote leave or remain was whether you had a degree. There was also the issue around the division between the metropolitan elite and very traditional communities who couldn't see what Europe did for them. Globalism versus nativism was another strong strand of division in the vote. And then lastly, you have groups who have, I think, been recognised as being rather disenfranchised for a long time, particularly white working class men who, again, voted very strongly to leave. And it struck me that universities were one of the three main beneficiaries of EU funding, along with agriculture in the regions. And they had been very, very vocal in how important EU funding was for them. But they had somehow failed to speak to these groups. And therefore, I think the question is, what could or should HE have done differently to avoid that?
So really interesting. Now, there must be a link between kind of that agenda and the sort of purpose and objects of a university.
Well, when you go back to where our universities came from, and here I'm really talking about the traditional sector, most of them are charities, and most of them are also very, very intimately connected to their regions. So it even goes as far as their names. They are the University of Nottingham, the University of Liverpool, of Leeds. And then when you go back to their establishment, the chartered universities were founded with an express objects to advance higher education through teaching and research, but often linked to the area that they were established in. And for the newer universities, the birth out of local authority is where the local connection arises. Now, I'm not saying that really the regional is the main focus or needs to be the only focus, but I think it is an important aspect of their existence.
Now, that's all very good, but I suspect that lots of student governors in the room will go back and identify the great and good from the region, particularly if they're outside London. But I think probably lots of them will then look at the agenda for the next few meetings and they won't see a lot of that stuff about region.
That's right, and I think it's all goes back to the question of where is the money, because you follow the money, don't you? So if you look at the big national assessments, the REF that's existing, the TEF that's to come, both of them have funding implications and both of them are assessed at a national level. Equally, when you look at things like national league tables or indeed global league tables, on which so much now hangs reputationally and indeed financially, they again tend to ignore regional activity. So it's easy to see how universities would prioritise those agendas over what can we do for our local communities.
And there's a funding dimension to this too, right?
Absolutely. And, let's be quite blunt about this. When you looked at what the effect of the Brexit vote is likely to be, universities are going to lose a lot of money. There was, in fact, funding hanging on that ability to persuade the regions to stay connected to the EU and to show them why it benefited them. So I think it's not just a sort of soft, fluffy, let's do something nice for the community. There is a real financial benefit in having a supportive community that will support policies that benefit their institutions. That's really what we're trying to do. I know that a lot of universities listening to this would say, actually, we do all that. You know, we do outreach and we work with local businesses and we're on local enterprise partnerships. And those are all great things to do, but they're not really getting at the heart of the disenfranchised, the excluded, the alienated. And there is, in my mind, a role that universities have to play in reaching out to them, not just waiting for them to make contact with the university.
Yeah, so I guess the sort of minibus that dispatches itself from UEA and drives around Great Yarmouth, scooping up the clever kids, is a bit different to actually focusing on economic deprivation in Great Yarmouth. But there's an equality aspect as well, isn't there, that you've argued previously?
Yes, there is. So I was looking then again at the public sector equality duty. Now, just a brief potted history of that for those who've forgotten it. It was introduced in the wake of the Macpherson inquiry, which was looking at the Stephen Lawrence, the investigation into the murder of Stephen Lawrence. And it was really designed to tackle initially institutional forms of discrimination. But when you look at the objectives it has, it's there to effectively foster good relations between people of different groups. It's there to advance equality of opportunity and to eliminate unfair disadvantage. Now, Brexit at its heart, I don't think was necessarily all about race or religion, but there were strong elements of that flowing through it. Communities that didn't feel comfortable with what they had become because of diversity. And so actually the public sector equality duty you could address things like that. That is about looking at how we deliver our services and what we do through the prism of equality and diversity. And so I think it should be more perhaps in the future than just a compliance box that we tick perhaps all too readily, and perhaps inform the strategies we adopt to reach out to communities.
Now, look, I think lots of student governors are going to be spending chunks of time this year talking about global issues, international students, outreach campuses, recruiting agents, all that sort of stuff. Is there a link between this kind of regional agenda and that global stuff, do you think?
Well, I've argued that there needs to be that relationship because, again, internationalisation, not just from the financial perspective, but from the intellectual capital and the culture that it brings to our campuses, is vital for higher education. But we need our communities to support it. And so I think that in the wake of the EU referendum vote, where it's very possible that the British voice will become less important on the international stage, universities need to double their efforts internationally, but find ways of connecting them back to the regions and showing local communities why it should matter that the university is attracting students from wherever they're coming from or has research partnerships, but constantly making the connection between the benefits of the community and the activity that's being undertaken.
Now, I've heard you talk before then, if we sort of wrap this up, about higher education needing to be accessible, relevant and trusted. So give us a sense of what that sort of triangle means for you.
So I think accessible means that local communities need to feel that the university is something for them, something that they can benefit from directly, whether it's through going and studying there or other ways of engaging with it. But it needs to have its doors open to its local community. I think relevance means that the things the university does need to directly improve people's lives wherever they can. And that might be about the research you do, it might be about the lifelong learning opportunities you provide, but directly benefiting people's lives. And I think trusted, it goes back to Michael Gove's comment that people don't trust experts anymore. And I think they don't trust experts because they don't necessarily feel that experts have their best interests at heart. And so my argument is that universities need to show their local communities that they have their best interests at heart, as well as the wider interests of the nation and the globe.
Now, we talked earlier in the event about this sort of three reasons for, three purposes for higher education governance. One, compliance, and that's not really why student governors are in the room. And one, performance and monitoring and managing performance. And again, that's not really why student governors are in the room. And the other being this sort of wider educational character and mission thing. And that is why student governors are in the room, but it doesn't come up very often. So what would you do? How can student governors get this debate going about educational character and mission and this stuff to do with regions?
Okay, I think there's a number of things they can do. The first is, I think, recognise that they are full members of this governing body and need to participate as full members. So their remit extends beyond the mere student interest to this wider question of what is our university. The second thing I think is to raise the issues wherever they can. So if they have the opportunity to talk to the chair about, concerns, most universities will now have annual at least development meetings to talk about what they're interested in. Alternatively, there might even be an AOB slot where you can put something forward to say, I'd like to hear about how do we approach educational character and mission. And I think, when you're looking at proposals that are coming forward, if you feel that there is a potential to introduce a regional element, perhaps raise that and say, well, how can we link this back to our communities and make our communities recognise the value of what we're doing?
Fantastic, brilliant. Thanks, Smita.